Now back to North Korea, successfully launching its first ever intercontinental ballistic missile, this capable of reaching most of Alaska. Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North, host of War Story, joins us now. Sir, I've got to ask you, how should we be responding to this? Because they are getting better at this at a much faster rate than anyone thought just 6 months ago.
Well, I'll tell you what, Charles, the nuclear weapons and the ICBMs that the North Koreans have been testing don't have to be all that accurate. I heard one of the previous administration's talking heads yesterday on the radio saying, well, they're really not that accurate. If it's an EMP burst, it doesn't have to be. And indeed, what you've seen happen is the last 3 tests have been a very high altitude and just exactly the right place you want to be for an electromagnetic pulse weapon. So that's not necessarily a sign of a bad deal working for the North Koreans. Second, reality check. The Obama administration for 8 years ignored real existential threats from both Pyongyang and Tehran. And it's been further proof that this utopian idea of we just unilaterally disarm, everybody else will, is, well, let's put it politely, it's not working. Yesterday, when they tested that weapon, they did things that they'd never been able to do before and ought to put the fear of God into everybody in the neighborhood, to include the Japanese. I heard one of your earlier guests suggest that there is a diplomatic solution on this. Let me add to that idea that we encourage the Japanese to amend their constitution and start developing their own nuclear weapons. And that's number one. Right. Number two, let's have some real sanctions. The nuclear weapons and ICBM programs with North Korea and Iran have been joined at the hip for years, and ever since the so-called Vienna Accord, the so-called nuclear deal, it's improved dramatically the ability to transfer technology and money to the North Koreans where grass truly is a vegetable. China is not going to help until Beijing feels the pain. And before we actually do a conventional strike, we ought to impose some real sanctions against any company doing any business whatsoever with both the Democratic People's Republic of Korea and Iran. Because if they can't do business anywhere in the world, they will stop doing what they're doing, and that means real pain. And we do have the ability to turn North Korea into an overdone Pop-Tart if we really want to use conventional weapons to do that.
All right, well, let's just hope that happens, because thus far, outside of stopping coal shipments, China has actually increased their commerce with North Korea. So, Colonel North, I do want to ask you about Canada. Sure. This story, they're paying a former Gitmo detainee more than $7 million as compensation for being mistreated. I mean, this is a man who pled guilty to killing a U.S. Army medic. Of course, he later recanted that, but the whole idea is that somehow his rights were violated, and Canada feels obligated to not only pay him $7 million, but to apologize to him as well.
Yeah, look, a socialist government is going to do some really stupid things, and they're our closest neighbors and one of our biggest trading partners, but that's a really stupid idea. And all it's going to do is to encourage others to make the same kinds of claims. Can you believe Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who was the architect of the 9/11 attack, we're going to apologize to him? I hope not.
I hope not either, but I'm really glad you were able to join us, Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North, host of War Stories. Thank you very much, as usual.